Everybody, welcome back to Mac and Mike. I'm Mike, and that's Mac. And
Indeed, I am.
This week we're kind of in the valley of decision. We had a whole bunch of things to talk about, and one of the things, though, is this week I had a friend who was in a severe accident where his wife was killed, and he's in the hospital. So I shared this with a lot of friends, to offer up prayers for him, and it got Mac and I talking because we've had a share of personal tragedies in our life where people have been killed and we've lost loved ones. And it's just amazing how things can change in an instant. You're going through life and you think, you're worried about politics and you're having, family problems and little work issues, maybe if you're not retired like Mac and I, or if you're in volunteer programs, you're having trouble dealing with people. Then all of a sudden something like this happens and everything in your life changes, and everything that was a problem, everything that seemed so serious before, is instantly nothing. Nothing. It has absolutely no power in your life anymore. And I think there's two lessons there. One is for us to deal with tragedy and cope with that. And the other should make us both appreciate the good times that we do have and understand that the things that get us so worked up, whether it's, politics, arguments with family, coworkers, etc., in the grand scheme of things, it's really nothing. What do you think, Mac?
Well, Mike, I have this saying that I use all the time. We all take our health for granted until we don't have it anymore, and then it becomes a big deal. And my other saying I like to say all the time is there's only one thing important in this life, and that's those people who you love and those people that love you. So I kind of tend to look at it the same way. We don't give enough consideration to what may happen. When my kids and grandkids visit me today, I always make sure that I give them a hug before they leave the building. And they're conditioned to it now, so they don't fight me on it anymore. Initially they're a little bit reluctant. They're not touchy-feely people by nature, and I tell them, I said, look, I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow. So I want you to know that I love you and I care about you and that kind of stuff. And so in the case of our mutual friend, it's a horrible, terrible, tragic accident, and it kind of makes you wonder. And we've entertained this question before: why does God allow these kinds of things to happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? The eternal question. And of course, we've answered that before. I don't want to go on a diatribe about it now, but the bottom line is that there's a reason for all things. And who was it? Was it Shakespeare that said, "All the world is a stage, and we are just actors upon it"?
Yeah.
And I think we have a role to play. And if you're religious, if you believe in God, one of the things I tell my family all the time is that whatever God has planned for us, whatever He sends our way, whatever is the situation, the condition, the good or bad that we find ourselves in, understand that it's God's plan for us, and the way we show God that we love Him is by accepting the plan that He has with as much happiness and pleasure and joy as we can possibly muster, even when it's bad things. Because I'll tell you, in my life, I've had some bad things happen, and some of those things that traditionally people would view as bad, they have good parts of them too. There's lessons learned, there's better understanding of my relationship with my God. So, there's a reason for all things, and we are mere men and do not understand. What is it in the Bible God says? You do not understand my ways.
Your ways are not my ways, and my ways are above your ways.
Yeah. So I think we need to take this all with a grain of salt. Understand that whatever befalls us is not necessarily because we did something wrong or we deserve punishment or whatever. But it's just like the good things we receive. It's just another version of the life experience that we must have for whatever God's reason and purpose is.
Yeah, and at the time when it happens, it's impossible to hear these words. So
no.
If
Yes,
something
right.
has recently happened to you, please don't misunderstand Mac or I. We understand personally that no consolation is going to happen at this point from these words. A friend of mine came to me, a neighbor actually, and he shared a tragedy after mine that he'd heard about mine on the news. And he said, Mike, I'm going to tell you, you're never going to forget this. But he said, I promise you it will become easier to deal with every day. And so if there's any solace to be had, I understand that anyone who's recently gone through this, any kind of tragedy where they've lost a loved one or something horrible's happened, it will get better. It's never going to be forgotten, but don't make any rash decisions. A lot of times people do stupid things. They they might commit suicide because they feel so guilty or at a loss when they lose a loved one. And you've got to give it time, so talk to your friends, get into counseling, do something during the initial phase especially. And over time, hopefully you'll be able to settle it, maybe rationalize it in some cases, not in all. And don't judge yourself too harshly for even questioning, why does God allow this to happen? Because it's sort of natural, especially when you're younger. Now, Mac and I have both experienced terrible things when we were younger and when we were older. And I said to him, I found that it was easier when I was older to not question God, because you'd already been through it once and you're more grounded and more mature. And so depending on what stage of life your tragedies occur can make a big difference as well.
I found myself, Mike, in a position where I hated everyone, including God. And I looked around at various other religions and various other forms of faith because I was so angry at what I felt was a terrible thing that had been done to me. And today, that tragic circumstance is still not okay. Okay? As a human being, I find myself in disbelief and not wanting to accept the truth of what happened. But what I've learned is that if you have a faith in your God, whoever that is for you, there's a possibility of coming to accept that He knows more than we do. And you accept whatever happened on faith because you cannot understand it. And if you can get to that point where you can where it's still not okay, but you're willing to accept it because you believe in your heart that your God has your best interest at heart, then it's easier to live with. That's kind of how I get through it. I don't understand. I'll never understand. I don't like that it happened. I still don't like that it happened. But I'm willing to accept, because I'm a mere man and not a God, that it was what had to be for that God's understanding, not mine. So that's where I'm at on that subject. And I think if you can say a prayer for our friend, that he gets through this, that would be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, amen to that. So on the second thing we were talking about too, we were talking about getting older, and we've talked about getting older before. But a more narrow question that we were talking about is, what would you do when you retire, if you could do it? And we came up with a whole bunch of things. I mean, when you're young, you have a lot of plans. Oh, when I retire, I'm going to go on cruises, I'm going to go on vacation, I'm going to travel the world, or I'm just going to be a couch potato and watch TV, or whatever. But one of the things that, we're here to warn you about, I think, as a couple older guys, if it's something that's going to take stamina and energy and physical strength, do that now. Do that while you're young, if you're young and listening to this. Because I traveled all over around the world in the Air Force. I mean, I saw every continent except Antarctica and Australia. I don't even have an inclination to want to travel, at least not outside the United States. I still love going to North Carolina to the Outer Banks or something, travel to Florida, no problem. But I even said, if somebody I know is heading over to Germany, and I spent a lot of time in Germany, and I said, I wouldn't want to go there today because I don't have the energy to walk around and see all the things that I want to see.
I love Germany. Germany is the only other place I've been in this world that I think I could live in other than the United States. So I'm with you, Mike. I understand. I think that when you're talking about making plans, you have to recognize that the things that you can do easily in your 40s are difficult to do when you're in your 60s and 70s. And I think for those people who have a spouse, you're probably in a different set of circumstances than Mike and I because we're by ourselves. And I always thought that I wanted to travel, but travel by yourself is different than travel with someone that you can share a room with and share a conversation with and do things together. And it just is different. And again, as Mike said, if it's strenuous or, never miss an opportunity to spend time with someone that you love and do things that you both enjoy, because you don't know whether or not that loved one is going to be with you when you do have the time and the inclination to do those things. That's a tragedy. Again, one of the things that I thought I'd do at this age and stage in my life was I would travel. I have the time to travel, but I have responsibilities for other loved ones, my father and my children, that I have to take care of. And so I'm not able to do that. At some point in the future, I anticipate being able to travel, but not having my spouse with me any longer. I'm not sure that it's going to be something that I'll want to do, You won't think about it until you're in those circumstances. Certainly people who are by themselves now probably think about it all the time. They do it all the time because they're accustomed to it. But when you're used to living with someone and sharing a whole lot of your life with someone else, and then that person is no longer there, you can find someone else to replace them. That's difficult. Let me tell you the kind of difficulty that is. But also, I think that it comes down to, you don't realize when you're married to someone and you spend so much time with one another, you get to the point where you know that person very, very well. You get to the point where you can almost predict what they're going to say or what they're going to do in a certain set of circumstances, because most of life circumstances you've already experienced as a couple. So when you try to make a new relationship with someone new, they don't share your history. They don't behave or act in the way that you behave and act. So it's a constant learning circumstance where, when your significant other may have behaved this way, this new person you're bringing into your life behaves another way completely. And it can be confusing. And not only confusing, it can be, displeasing in some ways. Yeah. But so travel, I don't think is in my future. Maybe.
Well, some travel. I mean, you had mentioned to me, like, years ago, Mac and I took a trip down to the Outer Banks together. And before that, I used to go every year to Florida with either Joe or Brent or Joe, Brent, and sometimes Joe would bring his wife. But, it's good. We were military. We're all veterans, we're all military buddies. We got lots of stuff in common. And so, that kind of travel can be fun. Now, Matt, interestingly, Max said earlier about wanting to go to Hawaii Space A for CU civilians, space available travel in the military, So if it's an empty plane heading that way, you can sometimes get on it. I said, I don't want to go all the way to Hawaii. I've been there so many times, and it's just as nice in the Caribbean, which is only a couple hours away. The climate's always better, and it's less expensive, and I think the food's overall better. So you got to go to a certain place in Curacao, or maybe Aruba is similar. But I don't mind.
People don't realize the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean are very, very different. Yeah.
Yeah, but I still like the United States. We then got sidetracked on a discussion about people that end up getting caught up in problems in North Korea and Russia and China and all these other countries. And I keep asking myself, after traveling so much, what in the world were these people doing there? I mean, my God, these days, I probably wouldn't even want to be anywhere in Europe. stay here in America. Things are getting better. There's always dangerous places to go in the United States too, but there's a big country, and you can avoid those areas most of the time if you want.
I've been to Italy and France and Austria and Germany, even the island of Grenada, Turks and Caicos. I've been around. I've been to many places, but the only place I think I felt really comfortable in was Germany. Germany is a very, very nice place to visit, very clean.
And again, it's location specific even in Germany.
That's true too. Yeah. But, the people are nice. In Germany, when you're struggling to speak German, almost universally Germans speak English.
Yeah.
And if you stumble over your German, they will assist you immediately by speaking English to you.
It's easier today with smartphones.
But if you go to France and you stumble over French,
they hate you anyway.
The French will intentionally misunderstand you to make you look silly and stupid. They don't like Americans. Now that may be because we're ugly Americans. We do stupid things in our country. That could be. I don't know. But yeah. So do the things that you want to do with your loved ones when you have the chance. As we talked about in the first segment, you don't know whether or not you may not have another chance. And the only thing important in this life are those people you love and those people that love you.
Yep. I think that summed those two particular things up. They sort of do tie together. Now, there was another subject that we wanted to talk about really briefly, and that was the recent revelations. We'll get political now for a moment on what Tulsi Gabbard released with all the shenanigans that went on with the Democratic Party and the intel agencies, trying not just to keep Trump from being president, but also to hamper his presidency while he was in office. I don't have a whole lot to say on it, but I'm sure Mac does.
Mike, when you come across these things that are so large and so much breadth to their potential impact, when you talk about the revelation that Tulsi Gabbard exposed. First, and the most important fact about the whole thing is that there is a memo that is written and signed that talks about what they're going to do, and then, of course, what they did. So, universally, when you hear a lot of these conspiracy theories, you say, where's the smoking gun? Well, they have the smoking gun, okay? And there's multiple implications. First is the implication of what impact, if any, did it have on our election? And arguably, Donald Trump got elected president anyways, and maybe it didn't materially affect the election. But if you remember, the whole Russiagate thing lasted a couple of years. He was impeached twice over it. There was a lot of news media coverage. There were a couple of organizations that received Pulitzer Prize for unveiling this terrible thing that Donald Trump did to try to
New York Times, Washington Post.
So the point I'm trying to make is that there was a very large and wide impact on our society as a whole. This whole lie that somehow became the truth, and that's a terrible thing. And then the ramifications that how it affected the Trump first term, right? For 2 years, people believed he was a criminal, and they would almost refuse to work with him and cooperate with him. And you remember the hearings we had where Colonel Vindman came in and said, "I make the policy for Ukraine." Yeah. I mean, how ridiculous is it that some lieutenant colonel in the military, part of the State Department, could determine that he makes U.S. policy towards Ukraine? But I think the largest impact that people have not discussed at all, at least not that I've heard, is what did it do to the United States and Russian, level of interaction? What negative impact did this lie have on the relationship between Russia and the United States of America? And it may be, and I'm not sure anybody's looking at it, and I'm not sure that we really know at this point in time, but that impact could have been real and dramatic. I've long thought that the Russian people and the American people of European descent share a lot of characteristics in common. Faith and our work ethic and our idea of self-reliance, and there's a lot of commonality between the Europeans and the residents of what we now call Russia. Even some of the Europeans would have been, some of the Eastern Europeans may have traveled to Russia and became more Russian than Russians were. And many of the Russians may have traveled westward and become more European, than they were Russia. There's a commonality there. And I've long thought that the Russian people and the American people, because of this similar, if not common heritage, should be friends. We should be allies. And governments, of course, have gotten in the way, and our form of government, our form of economic system, capitalist versus communist, our form of government with democracy and representative republic versus their communist socialist agenda. I mean, it got in the way of the American people and the Russian people actually becoming friendly. But what happened when America falsely accused Russia of meddling in our election, trying to get Donald Trump elected, when in fact, according to some of the stuff that I've read, the Russians were secretly hoping that Hillary Clinton would be elected because they had had some information that was very uncomplimentary about Hillary Clinton from the Democratic National Convention hacking of their computers that showed her to be unreliable,
unstable,
having her taking daily medication to calm her moods from these violent mood swings she had, and also some things about she may or may not have been completely healthy, prepared to be president of the United States. And the Russians wanted to take advantage of that based on this health information and reporting information that they had. So in a way, it was detrimental to them getting an advantage over the United States if Hillary Clinton had become president. But you look at what happened, the detrimental effect to the individual Donald Trump. You look at the detrimental effect that it had on the presidential campaign of Donald Trump. You look at the detrimental effect that it had on the first couple of years of the administration of Donald Trump. You look at the detrimental effect that it had on American-Russian relationships. And then, of course, we haven't talked about yet, if this is true, and I do believe there's a preponderance of evidence that indicates it is true, what about the head of the CIA, the head of the FBI, and the head of the Department of Justice creating lies, falsehoods, in order to push an agenda only for political reasons? Don't the United States, the people of the United States of America depends upon their law enforcement and the three-letter organizations that are supposed to keep this nation safe to be truthful, honest, and upright, and have integrity, and do the right thing, not the political thing. And I think that's a terrible aspect of this as well. I mean, if America loses faith in its premier law enforcement agencies, how do we recover from that?
I think it's already a done deal. I think we've already lost faith. Now, the thing is, if you listen to some of the FBI regular folks, they knew this was a bunch of hooey. They always did, and they pushed back. And they're busy actually, like FBI agents are out there doing their field work, and they're hearing about this stuff in Washington, which really isn't their concern. They're running down drug trafficking and, human trafficking and other kinds of national security threats within the United States. That's at least what some of them said, but they were sitting there in disbelief of their own leadership. So it's not just the American people that were disillusioned.
The rank and file.
It was the regular, FBI.
That do morale and esprit de corps,
Yeah, I knew CIA and NSA guys, and I always said they're good, honorable people. I mean, when you hear this crap, if you know somebody that's working for one of the alphabet agencies, don't sit there and think ill of them. It's not them. It was a small subset of leadership. and that's what needs to be routed out. And like you said, it has to be disciplined. There has to be some consequence. Otherwise, this will surely happen again in the future. And everybody says, "Oh, let's get past this." No, you don't get past this because you don't want it happening again. There must be consequences.
And when you find a story like this, Mike, that does have what appears to be certain proof. You remember in 1972 when the Watergate break-in at the DNC headquarters, and arguably then President Nixon didn't know about it in advance, but got caught up trying to do a cover-up of it, and he had to resign, right? But I guess what I'm trying to say is that if America doesn't trust its three-letter alphabet agencies, and this circumstance with this level of proof, we have to wait to see if it's adjudicated. We have to wait and see what actually happens. Maybe there's extenuating circumstances we're not aware of yet. But if the truth is the way it appears, then you look at what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania 6 or 8 months ago and say to yourself, or longer, when this young man was in a position to take a shot at then candidate, now President Trump. Can you trust that the group of people that were charged with keeping President Trump safe did the best job that they could that's possible? Now, I know we're talking about the Secret Service and not one of the alphabet agencies. I get it. But if you could have arguably the head of the FBI, the head of the DOJ, and the head of the CIA conspiring with then President Obama to create a false narrative to enable their favorite candidate to get elected, is it much of a reach to create a conspiracy theory that there was collusion and allowing this young man to get the shot off that nearly took then candidate, now President Trump's life? Because, to my way of thinking, that young man never should have been able to get in the position where he could shoot 8 times at the President of the United States from that distance. And of course, we killed him right away, so we couldn't interrogate him and find out what the story was. So doesn't that also feed into the potential or the possibility that there was, people can invent conspiracy theories all the time. The difference with this Russiagate thing is that this highly sensitive memo in paper form only, never appeared on any digital service, never appeared in any server, wasn't available in digital format. I think there were 5 copies of this memo, and DNI, Tulsi Gabbard, declassified it through the president, released it. By the way, rumor has it, again, we don't know, but that's where the conspiracy comes in, that the raid on Mar-a-Lago was specifically because the then administration thought that the memo that Tulsi Gabbard revealed last week
had a copy there,
that he had a copy of the memo and might use it in the future. And so, these are the kinds of things that the American people can't allow to be uncertainties. The American people have to know for certain whether or not this happened, and if it did happen, those responsible need to be punished. Now, we haven't talked about it, but I will tell you that there's something called presidential immunity, and very, very few things other than murder or rape, one of these victim crimes, there's very, very little the President of the United States can be brought up on charges. That's presidential immunity, upheld by the Supreme Court when they were dealing with an issue with Donald Trump. So Barack Obama's not going to go to jail. But the possibility of bad things happening to Jim Comey, to Clapper and Brennan, is very real. Is very, very real. If this memo is accurate, if there's not extenuating circumstances we're not aware of, what they did is they took intelligence that they knew was accurate and completely turned it around upside down and made up evidence that didn't exist so they could attack a presidential candidate and try to make sure he did not get elected. You know, I can go back. Do you remember the guy in the FBI, Lisa Struck, or Struck, and what was the
Lisa Page and Struck.
yeah,
Struck.
what was his name?
Ken Struck? Or I don't know. Struck.
Anyways,
Struck.
remember when he said, "We won't let it happen"?
Mhm.
See, when you take this statement now, when he testified in Congress, he says, "Oh, I meant the American people."
Yeah.
Now put what he said in context to this memo that Tulsi Gabbard just released last week.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're not going to let Donald Trump be president because they've got this thing that they're working on that makes it look like Russia changed the outcome of the election. You know, Mike, we don't know if all of this is true yet. And you, because you're much more conservative than I am in many ways, you didn't want to talk about this subject until you got more information, and I respect that. But to me, this issue is so big that if there's any possibility that it's accurate, we simply cannot let this go. We simply cannot let it go unpunished. And again, because of presidential immunity, even though, according to what I've read and seen so far, this was absolutely President Obama's decision and his instructions to make this up and to go after Donald Trump in this way. And because of that, his idea, but he won't be punished. But those people that carried out his instructions, Brennan, Clapper, Comey, this is go to jail kind of stuff. And anybody else that was involved. And, you know, Mike, we both served in the military, and we got that briefing every year. What's a legal order and what's an illegal order? And if it's a legal order, what do?
Follow it.
We follow it. There's not a choice. You can't say, I don't want to do this part, I only want to do this part. When you're given an order, and it's a lawful legal order, you follow it, or you face the consequences.
Mm-hmm.
However, if it is an immoral and illegal order, it's your duty to refuse to do it. And that's a pretty powerful thing in the military that they pounded into us annually, at least, if not more often.
Yeah, I got a problem with that anyway.
Why? Tell me about your problem.
Real quick, I've said this before. So things go before the Supreme Court all the time, and you have split decisions, and they're called opinions. So you take a regular military guy, whether he's an officer, enlisted, doesn't matter if you're college educated or not, and you have them trying to decide whether something is a legal or illegal order, when even the Supreme Court itself could be split. That's where you get into trouble. Now, some things are crystal clear. You know, you don't shoot innocent civilians, you don't shoot unarmed people, you don't shoot people that are surrendering. You know, those are the kind of things that are clear cut. But there are things that might come down through, I don't know, presidential sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, that when a cigar boat is taking off from the coast of South America and coming across the Gulf, that an F-16 takes off from, I don't know, a Howard Air Force Base and without warning sinks that cigar boat. Is that a lawful order? I don't know. So I'm not saying that any of that ever happened. Now, don't take me wrong. But what is and isn't a legal order sometimes isn't so clear. That's what I have to say about it.
Well, I guess to me, the dividing line would be this. If you knew that cigarette boat was taking off and you knew that it was absolutely for certain that it was an innocent civilian just enjoying their very expensive speedboat, and you carried out the order anyways, that would be wrong. But if you had no knowledge of this speedboat, of this cigarette boat, and you did not know what it was carrying, and you didn't know anybody aboard it, but you were told that they were bad actors who are enemies of the United States of America, and you're given an order to make certain that that boat doesn't reach the shoreline of the United States of America, and you followed that order, your conscience should be clear, and you should not be held to, the standard of legal versus illegal order.
Well, there's many other circumstances. That's just one that just sort of came to mind out of nowhere. I just sort of made it up out of thin air. But there are many other instances that could be discussed that we won't discuss that are, quasi borderline. But anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked too much on that. But I want to get back to the idea that I didn't want to talk about this because not enough's known. It's not that I don't think we know enough. I think that I've been disappointed so many times by getting my hopes up that there finally will be justice, so that I don't want to see justice because it's my personal thing and I want to see vengeance. That's not me. I want to make sure this doesn't happen again. That's my only reason. And I don't want to be disappointed.
Do you think that Tulsi Gabbard is more safe or less safe in her daily routine of life today than she was 3 weeks ago?
Oh, definitely less safe, but she was always unsafe. They had her on that no-fly list. That's what people are saying. Not no-fly list, but, watch her closely fly list.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people are using as an excuse. It's not just Trump's retribution. It's Tulsi Gabbard has an axe to grind because she was put on this list for no reason. Because Tulsi is a veteran. Tulsi was a Democrat presidential candidate. She was never a far-left crazy loon. To me, she was always a reasonable, honorable person, even when she was a Democrat. I had no problem with her personally. May have disagreed with a policy or two. I trust her completely to not have her own ego tied up in this.
She was one of the co-chairs of Bernie Sanders' campaign.
Yeah, and I knew some of those people, and I'll tell you, some Bernie Sanders people were okay.
Yeah,
you might not want to hear that out there, but I knew them personally, and they're good people. Misguided, but good.
Yeah, we can disagree without being disagreeable. But I guess my point with Tulsi Gabbard is that, in my opinion, what she did by revealing this information that she found in one of the most secure safes, access eyes only kind of thing to DNI and to other people with that level of, clearance above top secret. The risk that she takes by making that stuff public. It's not just President Obama. It's not just the former heads of the alphabet agencies that we discussed. But there are people behind those people who influence them significantly. And those people are the ones that really you need to be protected from. It's always interesting to me when accidents occur to people that it doesn't appear that there's a logical reason why these accidents happen. Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell. But what was his reason for taking his life if he did so? Was it because he was going to be in jail? With the amount of wealth that he has, is it not reasonable to assume that even in jail he could have a pretty reasonably okay life? I don't understand depression and anxiety that causes people to take their own life, so I can't really understand that. But when accidents occur that don't seem to make sense, or deaths occur that don't really seem to be able to be justified by logic, then you want to look for other reasons why it happened. And there are very, very rich and powerful people that don't necessarily want to be exposed for the things that they've done or the things that they possibly could do. And, unfortunately, a lot of people lack that conscience perspective that says you can't do that because it's, it's illegal or immoral. They tend to look at things, well, is it for the greater good? And I'm on the moral high ground. I can do this because I stand on the moral high ground. So we'll see what happens with this story, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
You said you were concerned nothing may happen. You may be disappointed. I will be disappointed if somebody doesn't go to jail. Now, I'm not looking for them to go to Alcatraz or for them to go to Sing Sing or for them to go to what's the prison in New York that everybody says is so
Rikers
horrible?
Island.
Rikers Island. But we have one of these white collar prisons here in northeast Pennsylvania, where they've got tennis courts and golf courses and nice weight rooms and TV day rooms and all that stuff. And I that's punishment enough, I think, because as you noted, the most important thing is let's put people on notice. If you want to do this next time, this is what you're going to face.
Think twice.
Yeah. I guess with that we should say,
Mike and
Mike and Mike,
out.
out.